today we're going to talk about this concept of a millennial, okay, and how astrology throws light on what millennials actually mean. So those of you who are familiar with this categorization know that millennials are associated with certain behavioral traits, such as, they are self-centered, they are very self-focused, and they're very much like entitled folk. Also, always on their phones, right? So they're all digital folk. But of course, okay, because I looked up the definition of millennials, and apparently you are a millennial if you are born between 1981 and 1996. So I definitely qualify. I was born in 1985. Okay, so the thing is, does astrology actually explain, how do we decide that someone is a millennial? And how is it that all these behavioral traits connect back to it? Okay, so this is what I'm going to suggest, okay? I believe that the categorization of Gen X, Gen Y, Millennial, it is right down to the position of Uranus in your birth chart. Okay, so for those of you who are unaware, okay, the planet Uranus changes sign approximately every 7 or 8 years. So every time you get a so-called generation, it's about 7-year batch of all the babies born within that 7 years. That's how this works. Now, what would be very interesting is that if we now look at 1981, now, those of you familiar with the astrological calculations know that Uranus changes sign in November of that year. So if you are born in 1981, if you were born before November, you have Uranus in Scorpio. And if you were born after November, you have Uranus in Sagittarius. So all those people, after the Sagittarius people, it will last for 7-8 years, and it goes all the way until about 1988. Okay, so that entire group of people, me included, you have Uranus in Sagittarius. Okay, what I'm about to show you is that how do we know? Is it visible? Can we actually tell that someone is like, wow, you're like millennial behavior, and then some people are not millennial behavior? So what we look is in 1981, there is a long list of very famous people born that year. And let me show you how clear the distinction is. Okay, let's begin here. Here are the people born in 1981 before November who are not millennials. Okay, so here's the list. And number 1, we have Beyonce. We also have number 2, Alicia Keys. Number 3, JJ Lin, also known as Lin Junjie. Now, what I want you to do is to compare this group of people to the people who were born after November. So born in December of 1981 is Britney Spears. And we also have, in the Asian world, Cindy Wang, also known as Wang Xingling. So if you actually look at these musicians, you will notice that people like Beyonce, Alicia Keys, JJ Lin, do they have like dance numbers? Yeah, I guess they kind of do. But when Uranus is in Scorpio, these people will be more associated with like a deep, emotional intensity, all the love songs, and they sing about like really more intense kind of topics. But if you realize that it's a very big change from when you have like Britney Spears and she's going, oops, I did it again. And Cindy Wang comes out with a lot of these TTT kind of tunes. And you realize that after the 1981, most of the new artists coming up after that, it starts to create this new genre known as bubblegum pop. And that's when we have a lot of these boy bands, girl bands, and all that stuff showing up. Now, I'm aware that quite a few of these other bands that showed up after that period, they may have ages that are beyond, they may have been born before 1981. But what I'm trying to say is that the appearance of these millennials in the music market has apparently moved the entire market into a completely different direction. Now, we also see this in movies. So looking at the actors who were born in 1981, let me give you 2 examples of famous actors born in 1981. The first is Tom Hiddleston. Most of you know him as Loki. And the other one is Natalie Portman, also born in 1981. Now, she's famous for playing Queen Amidala and a couple of other very intense roles like in Black Swan and a countless bunch of other, very dark roles. Okay, and of course, once we start moving into the 1982 range, we also have famous actors, but the energy shifts again. Now, the first one on my list is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. He was also featured in like superhero films. The one I remember is that he was in Batman. He played the kind of like a Robin kind of character. The other one on my list here is Kirsten Dunst. Some of you will know her as playing the girlfriend of Spider-Man. Okay, what you realize is that I've listed one male and one female on both sides, but the energy has shifted very much so. Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Kirsten Dunst have a much lighter energy. So you start to realize that a lot of these millennials have this very fun, excitement, less intense, right? Yes, I know that Kirsten Dunst has played some pretty intense roles, so has Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But in general, even personality-wise, they are a lot like a lighter kind of personality. Okay, so I've essentially showed you that among famous people, it's quite clear. You can see like non-millennial and millennial behavior. But then some of you who are born between 1981 to 1988 might actually kind of resent this term of millennials, because then you've looked at people who are kind of like slightly younger than you, like they could be right now maybe in their 20s-ish, and you might feel that, that they feel so different from you. And it feels funny that we're all lumped into this one category called millennials. And so here's the thing. Although millennials are supposed to be all the way from 1981 to 1996, that's really long, it's like 15 years. But right in the middle, which is 1988, you'll find that Uranus changed sign again. So the first group of people had Uranus in Sagittarius, and then there is the other group which has Uranus in Capricorn. Now this shift happens in the year 1988. Some people have sort of remarked that there are two types of millennials, and for the sake of discussion, I'm going to call it M1 and M2. Okay, so what we're going to see here is that let's try this again. And if we look in 1988, do we have any clear indications when we split them into two categories? We will have a look at what describes the difference between M1 and M2. Now first, looking at in the music world, okay, let's look at people who are M1 category. Okay, so on my list are Rihanna, Lady Gaga, and in the Asian world, on my list is Boa, the South Korean singer. That's M1. And now we look at M2, we have people like Adele, Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus, as well as Ariana Grande. Now what you want to notice between these two groups of people, like together they are all known as millennials. Okay, but what I'm going to propose here is that while you find that similar patterns show up with M1, they are still very light-hearted. There's a lot of this energy. They're associated with things like dance numbers, like Boa and Lady Gaga are all associated with that. Plus, they're also very much associated with a cause. There's some form of like wanting to educate or to sort of push for like a social cause in that sense. And Lady Gaga is very well known for things like that. Rihanna as well. But once we start to move into the M2 category, if you look at people like Adele, even people like Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus, it's very common that all these extremely young artists have actually gotten to a high level of success from a very young age. And if you realize that for many of these people, to receive awards like Grammys or even like to write songs for Hollywood movies, for example, in Adele's case, these are usually the kind of achievements that only happen to people when you've kind of you've been in the industry for about 10, 20 years, and then you get to that kind of levels. These people are achieving achievements that you don't normally see in very young people. So my theory here is that the people from M2 are very savvy. They are very conscious of the kind of actions that will contribute to their career as well as to public image that makes M2 very different from M1. Now let's look at another industry just to do a quick illustration. Okay, in the world of movies, you will see repeated this high energy, fun-loving thing coming out in M1 category. These include people like Emma Stone, who was recently in Zombieland 2, and she's also been in a host of romantic comedies and that kind of thing. You also see Liu Yifei, who was very recently in Mulan. Okay, so then again, that very high energy, martial arts kind of thing. The third one on my list is Emilia Clarke. Most of you know her as Daenerys Stormborn, the dragon lady in Game of Thrones. So all of these three ladies are associated with that energy, the physical, and also, as I said, carrying some kind of a cause, like they are fighting for something, like a female warrior of some sort. But when you start to look at the M2 category of female A-list female actresses, we have people like Emma Watson, we have people like Jennifer Lawrence, and what becomes very clear about the M2 group of actresses is how they've all racked up very high awards. Like Jennifer Lawrence is one of the youngest actresses ever to be nominated for Best Actress Oscar. And they've also been very good at getting themselves involved in very successful franchises, such as in Emma Watson's case, the Harry Potter franchise, and also the very savvy choice of acting roles that come after that. Same thing with Jennifer Lawrence. And I forgot the third one on my list was Kristen Stewart of the Twilight series. And of course, this extends beyond just the women in the whole M1, M2 category. You find that in the guys as well. If you look at men who are in the M1 category, like course people, G-Dragon from South Korea is on that list. You also find that people like Robert Pattinson are also like a lot of these high energy, physical type people. Now, M2 categories include very savvy actors like Daniel Radcliffe. You also have people like Ed Sheeran, who is a very, very young guy and he's gotten so many awards already. All of these guys coming from the M2 category. So what have I discovered from, examining all these examples here is that I think a lot of marketers and businesses have started talking about how you target millennials. I think sometimes understanding that there is a difference between M1 and M2, not just in their behavior, but also in what is important to them, and also how they go about in their careers and what their goals and their ambitions are, is not quite the same thing. Now, for those of you who might belong in one category or the other, sometimes it's very tempting to sort of try to copy what somebody else is doing. And then some people start to feel like, it's like, I was copying the actions, but not necessarily getting what I wanted for myself. Or you didn't think that you could just be yourself and just go for what it is that you wanted. So I hope this video is very useful to all of you. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe my video, and share with your friends who might be having some identity crisis about being a millennial, not a millennial. I'll see you guys in my next video.